Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Simpson. I'm a grad student at Queen's University in sports psychology, and today I'm presenting a proposal for an interdisciplinary scoping review on followership. And my collaborators slash supervisors are Dr. Luke Martin and Dr. Jean Cote. So I'd like to start you off with the question, what do Hermione, Scottie Pippen, and Robin all have in common? Now, you might say they're famous, they're heroes in one way or another, they're very entertaining. But what I'm trying to get at is that they're also considered to be followers in relation to their leaders. So, in relation to Harry Potter, Michael Jordan, and Batman. But traditionally, leaders have been getting the most research attention, and followers mainly remain an under-researched, kind of stigmatized role. And this is true for movie heroes and athletes, but also for people working in business, in medicine, in education, and so on. So, having realized that, I asked myself some questions. These are: what are leaders without their followers? Why do we always talk about leaders but never about followers? What do we know about followers? Can followership be taught and developed? And are there different types or styles of followers? And again, this mismatch is especially apparent in research. So for leaders, we know a lot. We know their characteristics, behaviors, and traits that are likely to make them leaders or that are desired in leaders. We know of different styles of leadership. We know of several outcomes of both good leadership and the lack of leadership. And there are several models and frameworks for leaders in sports dating back to the early 80s, which is when leadership research in sports specifically started picking up. And note that these are all references that are sports specific, but there are so many more references outside of sports as well on leadership, especially in the organizational area. So then again, what do we know about followers? Not so much, which might be surprising because an article, actually a scoping review in medicine, found that for every followership article, there are 60 leadership articles. And that might be a little weird because at least 80% of healthcare workers are followers, which another study found. But still, the main research interest is on leaders. So more recently, a study by Ulbin and colleagues found that, or kind of indicated that leaders and followers co-create leadership. So they are both important in that leadership process. And this means that followers can kind of actively shape leadership and its outcomes and should therefore not be disregarded in this process. So they kind of propose that we move from a leader-centric perspective more to a co-creation perspective or a collaborative aspect. But to do so, we first need to understand the other side of the coin better, being followers and the followership process, which is what my project tries to take a step at in. So I am proposing a scoping review on followership. And the purpose of scoping reviews is to synthesize evidence and assess the size of, in this case, the followership literature, so the scope of followership literature. And I chose an interdisciplinary approach because there's really only a handful of followership studies in sport specifically. So besides sport, I'm also looking at the disciplines of education, business, psychology, medicine, and sociology. And so my three research questions are the following. What is followership? So there I'll be looking at the conceptualization of followership, what three theories, frameworks have been used, and how has it been defined. Then next, I'm going to look at the way it's been studied. So any study methods, sample characteristics, who were the followers that were studied. And then finally, I'm going to try to link the different disciplines with sports specifically. So how can insights from past studies inform the sport area specifically, and this will touch upon group dynamics, so processes and emergent states that followership can either influence or lead to, as well as individual and team outcomes. So quickly on my methods, my study will be guided by a 5-step scoping review framework by Arksey and Malley, as well as a checklist, the Prisma scoping review checklist, that kind of just details all the steps that need to be included in a systematic, rigorous, and empirical methodology when you conduct a scoping review. And so I mentioned that I have multiple databases that I'm looking at for each discipline. So those are Sport Discus, PsycInfo, Medline, Education Resources Information Center, which is short for ERIC, and then Business and Sociology, both via ProQuest. My search terms are relatively simple: follower and followership. And I also have some initial numbers. So I typed those 2 search terms into those databases that I mentioned. And after removing duplicates, I ended up having 9,947 publications. So the next step will be to screen those at the title and abstract level for using inclusion and exclusion criteria to kind of narrow down the scope and really extract the ones that are relevant for my research questions. The contribution I hope to make is, first of all, to provide an empirical overview of followership insights and just research methods and research findings. Then I hope to collect implications of followership for teams, for example, which can then kind of identify knowledge gaps and inform follow-up studies in sports specifically. I hope that all of this adds a piece to the leadership puzzle, and that it might just lead us to change the way we talk about followers, moving from the stigmatized kind of understanding of followers being underperformers to more of a co-creative perspective that leaders and followers work together to create leadership. And I'd like to end with this quote by Scottie Pippen, who said that sometimes a player's greatest challenge is coming to grips with his role on the team. And my hope is that studies like mine and future studies on followership will help people like Hermione, Robin, and Scottie to come to grips with their role on the team and embrace the role of followers and the impact they can have for leadership and for team outcomes. So these are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to any questions you may have.